Hey everyone, a couple months ago I did a video on diet and exercise for scientists and engineers and grad students and how to fit wellness into a busy life without any kind of hype and looks maxing dudes on the internet that you're often subjected to. And so I was invited by Jeff Koslofsky, who is the senior marketing strategist for the School of Medicine and Dentistry at the University of Rochester, to sit in on a panel to discuss some of these ideas in more depth with some folks, Amber and Holly, who are way more qualified than I am to discuss these issues. So I was able to pepper in some anecdotes from my own life and career, and hopefully you find it useful. I put in some helpful links to the rest of Jeff's catalog. There's a lot of really great stuff, especially if you're fans of this channel. There's a lot of great stuff and resources for graduate students and medical students and early career scientists and engineers. So check it out, take a look in the description, and hope you enjoy this.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is our first ever recording with a live studio audience of the Next Step podcast. I'm Jeff Koslofsky, your host, and I'm thrilled to have our guests here today, and we're going to get to introductions here in a minute. Today we're talking nutrition and fitness for graduate trainees, for those who spend long hours in a lab or just busy people looking to fit physical activity and healthy diet habits into their life. I think, if that sounds like you, you're going to enjoy this one today. We did receive a few questions ahead of time, so we'll be sure to address those. As I mentioned, we've got a fantastic panel, and I want to go through everybody here in a second. But I want to start with you, Darren. I'm glad you sat right to my left. So when you look at this panel, we've got registered dietitian, nutritionist, director of learner life and wellness, professor and chair chemical engineering. So you might be thinking, well, where does Darren fit into all this? But I do have to give credit where credit is due. Darren is the inspiration sort of for this whole thing. I stumbled upon Darren's YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, Darren Lapomi on YouTube. Great stuff for graduate trainees. And I believe the title of the video I saw was Diet and Exercise for Sedentary Nerds.
That's right.
That's okay. So we couldn't call it that today, but that caught my attention, and thought that would be, an excellent topic to share more broadly if we could. And Darren had some awesome tips that I wanted to dive into. So Darren is actually, he's lived it. He still lives it. And I think can offer a lot of practical tips and strategies today. So Darren, let's start with you. Can you just do a brief introduction?
Sure. My name's Darren Lapomi. I am a Rochester native. I lived away from Rochester from 2001 to 2024, and I'm back here now. My previous job was at UC San Diego, where I was for 12 years, and for the last 2 of those years was Associate Dean for Students in the School of Engineering. And my research concerns organic semiconductors. These are materials that are carbon-based, and we have several application areas, and healthcare and biomedical devices being one of them. And so happy to be here.
All right. Amber?
Hi, I'm Amber Rivera. I'm Director of Learner Life and Wellness at the School of Medicine and Dentistry in the Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs Office. This is a brand new role that I'm filling, and I've been here for a little over a year. My background is in social work, and I have 15 years in higher education, but the type of student that I worked with before coming here was much different. In academic-wise, I was a counselor for 15 years for adults who were going back to high school to earn their high school equivalency diploma. And so it's a big leap to be working with researchers and PhDs in the room, but a lot of basic needs are the same, whether you are studying for the GED exam or you are defending for a PhD. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And Holly?
Yes, so my name is Holly Gilligan. Similar to Darren, I am a native of the greater Rochester area. I was in New Haven for 9 years, working on the transplant team at Yale New Haven Hospital, and then I moved back here a couple years ago. And now I am the registered dietitian for the fitness science program under the umbrella of URMC Orthopedics. I'm a lifelong athlete, so that's always been my focus. I work with clients of any kind at Fitness Science, mostly athletes, but also adults, children, quite a few college students, grad students. I remember my grad school years, they were very stressful, and it's helpful to kind of put myself back in those shoes and work with students who are needing quick fixes and ways to be healthy within a tight, very stressful schedule. So it's been a great time being back here and working with this population of people.
All right. Thank you all. Amber, I want to start with you. So you mentioned 15 years in higher education, different forms of it.
Yes.
You've worked with a lot of students and now trainees here, and you're dealing with a lot of, I'm sure a lot of them have the, common issues of whether it's anxiety or stress or conflict with a peer or professor, anything like that. Let's start by just talking about why prioritizing your own physical health, just your own health in general, is essential for having success in your academics.
Yes, when you start graduate school, you put so many plans into place. You plan for a lot, and you might have even planned a really big move. You might be away from your family. And a lot of times you're not thinking through the very, very basics of your health. So what time are you going to go to bed every night? Are you going to maintain healthy sleep habits? How are you going to do that? How are you going to make time for exercise? Like Holly said, how are you going to make time for nutrition when you work long hours? So those things tend to get overlooked when we talk about physical health, but they have big impact on our mental health as well. Even something as simple as getting up from your workstation and taking a walk out in nature if you can, it provides such a good buffer for stress. You cannot understate or overstate how much of a buffer that provides and a big boost to your mental health. So little things like that, it sounds very basic. It's very back to basics, but they tend to get overlooked when you're making big changes in your life, such as graduate school.
And Darren, as Amber mentioned sleep and all of those essential things. And I know we talked leading up to this during your graduate experience, sleep was suffering, high anxiety with class and studies and things along those lines. So you kind of, realized it early on, or realized it during your graduate studies that, okay, maybe I need to pay a little more attention. Can you talk about some of the things that were going on when you were a graduate student that kind of made you, kind of made the light bulb go on?
Yeah, it's totally possible to be driving with the brakes on as a graduate student. I was running, I was training for a marathon, but I was also sometimes drinking 2 cherry Cokes a day and 2 Snickers bars, one for lunch and one for pre-dinner. And I wasn't sleeping very well, really, at all. I'm a pretty anxious person by nature. I think that's pretty common among STEM graduate students, or really any graduate or medical student. And I started to get heart palpitations, and a lot of them. I would have maybe 100 premature ventricular contractions a day that and these are just the ones I noticed. And I would have these tachycardias. I had a full cardiovascular workup. I had a cardiac MRI, which was one of the coolest experience. See, I'm betraying my profession. Experiences. Not that I wanted to be doing that at that time. And in the end, the electrophysiologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston told me to smell the roses, and that there was no sign of an autoimmune issue with my heart, that I wasn't sleeping, and that I was too stressed out. And so that was a wake up call. And around the same time, I was working in a chemistry lab. My PhD is in chemistry, and I sprayed acid in my face. And then in the ambulance, my blood pressure was like 170/80. And granted, I was in an ambulance, but the EMT and later the nurse told me, "You're going to get kidney damage if you don't figure out how to fix that." So those are my two calls to action.
And then, kind of what were some things you started incorporating into your sort of regular life to help improve all that?
I didn't end up fixing the sleep issue until much later in life. And there was a year in 2021 where, this got really heavy really quick, but my dad died. Oh. My sister's ex-husband died by suicide. I had a friend suffer a heat stroke and pass away while hiking. One of my graduate students fell off a ski jump and was in a coma for a week. 2 months later, was actually on Jeopardy and came in second place. And I couldn't sleep at all. It went from just plain vanilla poor sleep to sleeping 2 hours a night. And so it takes way too long to get a psychiatric appointment in student health. So I went to my primary care doctor, and I got counseling, and I got an SSRI. And between the two of those, it was life changing.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And now, Holly, I want to jump to you now and talk a little bit, along the nutrition side of things. I think it's easy to get, caught up in coffee and or just a lot of people. I know myself, like when I am working hard at something or just maybe a little bit of stress, my body tends to react by not wanting to eat. Mm-hmm. What are some ways we can sort of fight that, or to sort of tell our bodies something differently there?
Yes, so I do tend to see this on both ends of the spectrum. Most people fall into either extreme levels of stress lead to zero appetite, or it leads to an excessive amount of snacking. And both of those don't necessarily help our overall health. So on the one side of things, when stress leads to no appetite, that has it's immediately detrimental to what we're trying to do, to studying when our brain doesn't have energy, to trying to pass our exams and stay focused. So what I like to refer to this as business eating, where we start scheduling in some snacks as just another part of our day. Just like you have 4 classes today and this meeting, we're scheduling in a business snack. And we know we're not hungry for it, but we know that it has to go down. It's going to provide us that fuel. And if we have to think about it like that, sometimes that makes it a little bit easier to get down. And it really has to come down to planning ahead, because when we're not hungry and our day is packed from sunup to sundown, you won't just think about food and stop and take a break to eat that. So you are going to have to do the work of, okay, maybe you save yourself 10 minutes every single night where you just plan ahead. These are the 5 snacks I'm just going to throw into my backpack, and I'm going to business eat them at 8:30, 12 o'clock, 2 p.m., and we're just going to get them down. Or I know I'm going to be swinging through coffee roasters, and there's a sandwich in there, and I'm scheduling that right in to make sure we are getting that fuel in. Food is the quickest thing to go when you don't have an appetite, and it's really just kind of sinking you deeper into that negative cycle. And then the less you eat, the less the appetite is there, the less we're focused and concentrated, and it can kind of downhill ski pretty quickly there.
Amber, you mentioned last week when we were preparing for this that there's actually some connection components that can come with meal planning, as Holly talked about. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things some students are doing now to sort of help with that?
Sure. Yeah, I talked to trainees that go through exactly what Holly is describing, that they know that their eating is dysregulated because of stress and because of the schedule that they're trying to keep up with, and the level of productivity at this level of education is just so high. And they tell me, I know I need to pack snacks. I know I need to tell myself to eat and schedule those times throughout the day. So that's very real for our trainees. And some of our trainees are discovering the impact of social connections around meals and meal planning. So something like a supper club where you get together with 4 other people. And since there's 5 weeknights, each one of you takes a night and cooks a meal for everyone in the supper club. So you're only cooking once a week, but you're getting 5 meals a week. And if supper club doesn't fit your exact needs, there's other ways to socially connect around meals. I had a trainee come and talk about some depression symptoms that were arising. And what was helpful was the peer group around this trainee noticed as well and said, let us come over to your apartment and let's just meal plan for an entire week and stock your freezer, because you're not eating, because you don't feel well, because you're experiencing depression, and you're also suffering all of the other effects that come from depression. Your grades are slipping. Your social connections are suffering. Let us help you. And so there's just so many good creative opportunities when you allow your peers and your network to come in a little bit with a little bit of vulnerability, a little bit of asking for some help, and some real creative ideas can come around social connections and food.
That's amazing. And it's also amazing, Holly, what you can do with a microwave, right? Because I know you mentioned you work a lot with athletes, and folks that live on a typical undergrad campus or in a dorm where they only have a microwave. But and we'll try to link to this in the show notes and send it around. And for those that are here, there's a copy of this outside on the table. But this balanced microwavable meals handout that you have, I was looking through it. Loaded nachos, chicken and broccoli Alfredo, pineapple teriyaki chicken meatball bowl. I mean, like, these are like legit meals. It's
Absolutely.
not like a potato and frozen. I mean, some of that is mixed in, but
Yeah.
like, there's some amazing stuff you can do with
Absolutely.
just a microwave.
Yeah. And so I do work with a lot of college students who just have that available. And I think when we're thinking of healthy foods and good balanced meals, we immediately think of, that's something I don't have time for. That requires a lot of time. That requires multiple pots and pans and stoves. And it does not have to. Frozen vegetables are phenomenal. We can do a lot with those. Steam them in the microwave, add them to things. Ramen noodles, still super cheap. Throw away the seasoning packet there, reduce that salt a little bit, and add your own salt to that. But you start with that as your base. What veggies am I adding to this? Bag of frozen veggies. What protein am I adding? You can make eggs in the microwave. There's frozen grilled chicken strips. There's steak strips. There's shrimp. You can make just about anything at this point in the microwave and just toss it all together, add some sauce to that, add some seasoning to that. It's pretty endless. If we're thinking about a carb, a protein, a color, we can find all 3 of those things to throw together in a microwave in 6 minutes. We're eating more than just a Snickers bar or some cereal, and we're getting a good balanced meal, and we did not have to take away a huge chunk of our evening to do that.
Do you have a favorite on this list?
I do. I love to make a potato in the microwave. Okay. They're so cheap. Just stab some holes in that. 6 minutes in the microwave. The whole thing is cooked, and you can do so much with a potato.
Yes.
They're packed with nutrients. Eat the skin. That's where all the fiber is. There's a lot you can get out of that.
I didn't know that about the skin.
Absolutely.
And then there's this other handout. Can you talk a little bit about this one? And we'll also link to this. But it's kind of just, the idea is making sure you always have a few of these kind of stockpiled, and just, if you're strapped for time, is it about just kind of picking one and
Absolutely.
from each section? And
yes. So there's a grid that I like to start with for anybody who wants to do some kind of meal planning but does not want to get into all the time of that. You take this grid, you fill out what's my grains and starches I'm eating all the time, my proteins, my fats, my fruits and veggies, my seasonings, and then you fill it out on a grid. And if you can make sure 3 times a day you've got a meal that has 1 item in every category, you can check that box. You've got a balanced meal. We're going to be getting in all the macronutrients to help make sure you're sustained for several hours. And that's just a really good way to see, okay, I'm throwing together a quick snack. Can I pluck a couple items out of at least a couple of these columns? It's going to be much more balanced. It's going to be much more satisfying.
Darren, any staples in your fridge or diet these days that keep you going throughout the day?
My wife and I cook on Sundays, and I originally started using the stock pot to brew beer, and now it's our stew pot. And so each one of us only cooks a few times a week, and then we eat it for days. At my office, I'm hungry all the time. I'm somebody who responds to stress in the hungry side of the equation. And unless I'm going to meetings all day, I'm always kind of too close to my refrigerator and the microwave. So I bring a lot of fruits and vegetables to work, and I can easily polish off a clamshell of strawberries in one sitting, or half a pound of broccoli, and I'll have the peanut butter there. It's not nearly as exciting as Holly's recipes, but that's how I kind of feel like I can keep the hunger pangs down while not, overly filling my body with really calorie dense items like I might find at the student union or the vending machine.
And before we move to, I want to switch topics to movement here in a minute. Holly, I did just want to ask you, it is easy, especially on social media. All of us are on one platform or another where there are quote unquote experts, diets, fads. Are there general rules or things to look for to know when there's a red flag for a diet or something along those lines?
Yeah, there's a couple red flags we want to be careful with. And of course, there's nuance to everything. Mm-hmm. But in general, when a diet is cutting out entire food groups for no real medical reason, we likely want to take pause there. We do need all macronutrients, and the more variety we have in the diet, the better. So just being careful with things like that. Balance is key. If every recommendation is followed up with trying to sell you something, that is usually a really good red flag. Declarations that we require certain supplements in order to get enough of any kind of nutrient is usually a red flag. Look for registered dietitians. Look for PhDs in nutrition science when you're looking. And just make sure that we're always kind of taking everything with a grain of salt. Anything that's declared in any extremes is usually something we want to take pause. And also remembering that there isn't one size fits all when it comes to nutrition. So gather what you want from certain things, but make sure you are applying it to your life, and not letting that contribute to you feeling guilty about maybe not hitting what is quote unquote the proper or appropriate diet that we all should be following. There's a lot of nuance to that.
And I lied. We're not going to move on quite yet because we did have a couple questions submitted specific to nutrition before we move on, and others feel free to chime in. One was specific to black beans. Somebody just wants to know, how do you cook black beans? And if Darren or Amber, if you have black bean recipes, please share. But Holly, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, I love a black bean. So first and foremost, especially for anybody low on time, we don't have to get the dried beans that you soak. A canned bean is perfectly fine. The only time I'm careful with those is if you have blood pressure issues. Obviously, sodium is going to be a lot more abundant in canned foods. Rinse beans really well. You can just warm them up on the stovetop. Add whatever seasonings you like. I like a chili powder. I like cumin quite a bit. Paprika is one of my favorites. And sprinkle some cilantro on top of there. Okay. You can throw beans into anything, or just eat them plain, warm with your favorite seasonings in them is kind of the easiest way to go. Nothing special.
All right. Anybody else black beans? No?
I throw them on flatbread for my kids. I make little pizzas with flatbread and just a little bit of cheese and they love the black beans and corn, and I'm sneaking in some veggies. That's something that they'll actually eat.
I love that.
I'm going to say something non-scientific. The one thing that people, I think, sometimes are concerned about dried beans versus canned beans is the plastic liner in a can. And this is the one thing, I don't have data for this, but microplastics don't come off the inside of the can liner. Most microplastics are released from the environment through laundry, honestly. And so canned beans, totally fine. Don't spend an hour soaking them or overnights. Okay, they do come out better if you do it that way. But
Good to know, though.
Yeah. I'll make one other diet comment. So there's a lot in the news about ultra-processed foods. And one of the ways to avoid snacks and candy is by visualizing when you get that hit of sweetness, creaminess, umami, salty, whatever, that product was engineered to get you to eat as much of it as possible. And by recognizing that, you can like deflect that urge and say, haha, gotcha, M&M Mars. Like, I know why you put those ingredients in there, and I'm not going to fall for it.
And sometimes, once in a while, it's okay to say, you got me.
Oh, yeah.
M&Ms.
Yeah.
Okay. Once in a while. And then the last thing on nutrition, somebody asked about guidelines for target macro ranges. Are there general guidelines, or is that, based on weight or goals? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's based on a lot of things. It's based on weight, height. It's based on activity level significantly. It's based on level of muscle mass. So there's a lot of nuance that goes into that. If you're looking for just some general guidelines for yourself, Mayo Clinic website has a daily calorie need calculator that takes into account your activity level as best as you can. There's some nuance to estimating that. So that's a good place to start for that. The best way to tell if you are intaking enough calories or too much or too little is reflecting on what your body size does over time. And that's kind of the best way to tell. Macronutrient-wise, protein, first and foremost, is what we want to be focused on. Making sure you're getting adequate protein. It's going to help keep you fuller longer. It's going to protect your lean body mass. Guidelines for that, most people should be aiming for about 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. That range can go all the way up to 2.5, where it's effective. Nobody in grad school is likely going to be doing 2.5. That becomes a part-time job, so we don't need to be going there. If you're just trying to get adequate protein to satisfy you throughout the day, make sure we're not super hungry all the time, about 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram is a good range to aim for yourself. The fat and the carbohydrates matter a little bit less. That's based on energy expenditure. If you're out running, you're doing heavy workouts, we want to ramp those carbohydrates up, maybe half the plate, third of the plate. But simplest way to think about it is if you can just evenly get your plates to be carbs, protein, color in relatively even amounts, that is the simplest way to go about kind of checking where you're at and staying balanced without diving too much into the numbers.
All right. Awesome. Well, let's switch over to talking about movement for a little while. And at the beginning, Amber, you touched on the importance of small movements, getting out for walks. Can we just revisit that again before we jump into the conversation? And because I think it is easy to get into the trap of, and at least I used to think about it like this too. Like if I can't do an hour workout or 45-minute workout, anything else isn't really going to make a difference. Or, those extra, like doing 10 squats every hour isn't going to be a big deal. But that little things like that are. And can you touch on that again? Just the importance of thinking about that throughout your day?
Sure. I mean, the mental health aspect of it as a buffer against stress. And also things like emerging depression. The research is showing that the higher your level of physical activity, the lower your risk of depression. And anxiety comes along with that as well. And when you're in graduate school and you are handling all the multiple roles that you're handling as a graduate student, especially in science, there's a real risk of anxiety and depression becoming out of control. And then when you start to think, well, how am I going to make time to see a counselor? How am I going to make time to address these? It just kind of snowballs there. So there are some things that you can do to help buffer yourself against the effects of stress, depression, and anxiety, and getting in touch with your senses and movement of your body are two really, really big ones that seem very, very simple, but they have just outsized effects based on the amount of effort that you have to put in. But the effects that you get out of that are pretty incredible. Also, nature. And again, that comes into play with your senses. So if you are really, really wrapped up in your work, and you're finding it difficult to pull yourself away, that can be a red flag for you that you're going to be at risk of burnout, high levels of stress if you cannot pull yourself away from your work. And this type of work that our trainees are involved in, it's their identity. They're very wrapped up in that. It's more than just work. And so you do need to step away and actually changing your physical environment and getting out into nature if you can, if it's not too cold, is a way to ground yourself and to just get back in touch and align all of your senses and your mental health to just protect yourself against the effects of stress, burnout, depression, and anxiety.
Holly, can you speak to any kind of examples or what you might tell your clients to do if they are in kind of sedentary work all day, whether it's in a lab or sitting at a desk? What are some easy ways to incorporate movement into their day?
Yeah, so I do work with a lot of people, all age ranges, who have sedentary jobs. And a couple of my go-to recommendations are, first and foremost, locate the furthest bathroom in your building. That is now your number one bathroom. Every time you get up, you're walking to that bathroom. It's just going to add steps. And we're always talking about zooming out. So by the end of the week, if you've chosen a further bathroom, we've now added many thousand additional steps on. Doesn't feel like anything in the moment, but it adds up. The other recommendation I always make is every time you get up from your seat, when you return, 5 to 10 squats before you sit down. Again, in the moment, it seems useless, but by the end of the week, we've now tacked on a couple hundred squats we weren't previously doing. And things like that can really add up. And there is a lot more research to show now that little bursts of exercise in certain occasions can be more beneficial to our overall health, to blood sugar, to cardiovascular risk, than sitting for lengthy periods of time and trying to slam in a really intense workout at the end of the week. So the little bursts feel less effective in the moment, but for a lot of reasons can be the best thing that you can be doing for yourself. And then, of course, the age-old always take the stairs when that's available. That does remain very useful.
And Darren, any advice from your end on incorporating movement into daily routine?
I try to get a formal workout in every day, but I often don't succeed. And sometimes I can do an equivalent amount of exercise by augmenting certain daily tasks. So I'm in Zone 3 South, which is awful, on the river campus, and I will pass spots in order to park farther away. And in the winter, I run to my office as a means primarily of keeping warm, but also because I get 0.6 miles logged on my watch. I do take the stairs unless I'm coming into the building with somebody with whom I'm having a conversation, because I'm worried about the social pressure of being sanctimonious, like I'm going to take the stairs. Sorry, we'll catch up when I get up there. I have a standing desk at work. I don't ever sit at work unless it is something that requires 100% of my attention, because there's part of your executive function, I think, that gets overloaded if you're trying to do an active hold of your leg muscles while you're working. So if it's grant writing, that's usually sitting. When I wait with my daughter for the bus to come, I'll do calf raises and squats, and I've become less and less concerned about what the passing motorists think of me while I'm doing that. And then finally, an engineering control is that on swimming days, I will not shower in the morning because I am forcing myself to go because I won't go through the whole day stinky. And so that will force me to go to the pool.
I like. I mean, yeah, you mentioned that's like one of the biggest life hacks is a nighttime shower.
Right. They're little behavioral. It's like the same thing as putting the alarm clock away from you, so you have to you have to get out of bed in order to turn it off. But I know that stuff sounds totally life hacky and like that sounds ridiculous. Oh yeah, yard work is the other thing. I shoveled snow. We have a long driveway. I shoveled snow for an hour and 15 minutes this morning, and I don't plan on doing any other exercise today.
I think that's important, like a mindset though, to get in. Again, the walking across the building to go to the bathroom or shoveling snow, like that, even though it may, I mean, I'm sure that felt like something in the moment, but you don't think of it as a workout. You don't think of the 10 squats or that quick burst as a workout, but the cumulative effects are like, they have a huge impact. And you mentioned also not minding, Darren, what passersby are thinking of you. I mean, that's honestly a barrier, right? Like people are probably afraid to look ridiculous if they are in an office environment or a lab environment doing 10 push-ups once in a while. But, how do we get past that? Do we just have to do it?
Oh, it's a huge barrier. It's like you say you have an office with a door and someone knocks and you're out of breath and people are like, why are you out of breath?
I don't know. I think at the same time, though, it could be, while it is, yes, we all feel ridiculous, but maybe it's a motivation to somebody else or
Could be.
Maybe.
Find one person who's willing to be on board with you and then at least kind of share some of that could be helpful.
Yeah, and reframe it too. It's habit stacking. It's not being ridiculous. It's like Holly said, you're going to be in the habit of using a restroom, pick the one that's the furthest away. So you've just stacked two habits together. Darren is in the habit of waiting for the school bus every single morning. He'll be out there doing that. So he is kind of sandwiching another habit on there of calf raises. And so, you think a little bit less about doing something ridiculous when you can reframe it as a positive thing. I'm habit stacking today.
I love it. Well, coming up towards the end here, let's talk about resources now that are available for trainees. And Amber, I want to start with you and have you talk a little bit about that. As far as being healthy, staying active, what are certain things that graduate trainees may not know about that can help them in a pursuit of being more active or being more conscious of their nutrition?
Yeah, I think some of our trainees may find it helpful to know that if there is a cost barrier that's coming into play with any nutrition goals or fitness goals, such as joining a gym or having the appropriate footwear, or even just having enough money for basic needs to be able to have, as Holly, I love how Holly puts it, a color on the plate, that the university has the basic needs hub and you can put in a request if you are a graduate student. It doesn't apply to our postdocs, but for graduate students, if you are noticing a need that's financial in nature and it's something that's getting in the way of some of your basic needs, and a lot of that can be food and health, that is a resource that our students can take advantage of. And it's a simple request form. And if you're in School of Medicine and Dentistry graduate education, that request form comes to me. So it's a familiar face. It's somebody that you are familiar with, and you can come and talk to me about it, and we can see if we can get that need met for you.
Awesome. Holly, we mentioned your microwavable meals, the meal planning sheet. Anything else you can point us to? We mentioned the Mayo Clinic calorie calculator.
All good places there. There are dietitians that work within U of R in the health services department, I believe students have free access to that. I'm not entirely
Okay.
sure about that, but I
check
know
on
there are dietitians. So that's a resource. And then social media, obviously, we have to be very careful with who we're looking at, but there are lots of great resources there. So look for that registered dietitian on social media. Right off the top of my head, one that I think of that I direct people to a lot, his name is Zach Cohen. He's on Instagram, and his whole entire page is about cheap, easy, balanced meals, things that you can make very quickly, very cheaply. So that's a really good resource. So just kind of taking advantage of free things that you can look for that just can help direct you and give you good ideas.
Yeah, I think you mentioned too you'd have like a list of people that you would recommend to follow. So we'll get that from you and maybe
Yes,
put that
absolutely.
in our show description. Darren, anything worth mentioning on the resource side?
I think the primary resource that is overlooked by graduate students is their primary care provider. I sort of sold the farm in my first answer, so I said this already, but often when I was associate dean for students and we had 10,000 students in our engineering program at UC San Diego, we had several events happen during my time there. First there was COVID, and then there was the graduate student strike and a lot of financial uncertainty, housing uncertainty, primarily because of cost of living and housing. And students were going through a lot, and they would tell me that the counseling and psychological services office, they were great, but it took a long time to get an appointment. And if they reached out through student health directly to the psychiatric department, that would take a long time. But your primary care doctor is trained in many of the relevant areas to get you hooked up with the help that you need. And that's I would say an overlooked resource.
All right. Anybody out there have a question before we wrap up?
I'm a third year PhD student. So the thing is, for the graduate student, they have so many things to do. Like they have to study. They have if anyone wants to lead a healthy life, they can consider exercise for each day, and they have the family life as well. They have the kids, so they have to maintain everything in a to get in a good shape. So I just want to know, so do you have any recommendation how to make a work-life balance, like including everything? I know there is a lot of things, but from your perspective, what could be the good way to make it more balanced? Thank you.
Anybody want to take that one first?
Happy to start. I think in cases where I feel overwhelmed at home with work, it's when I take not necessarily work home with me, but the idea of unfinished tasks home with me. And I think if I were more on days where I am more intentional and intelligent about what tasks I prioritize to wipe off the slate before I go home, then I feel more well-regulated at home. Like I can devote time to my family and meal planning and exercise and all the meditation and all the things that are good for you. But if there was, say a referee report or something that I needed to respond to, or there was a key document in a grant submission that I didn't do, and I don't know why I didn't do it. For some reason I responded to 20 emails instead of doing that. That's the thing that's going to stick with me. And then I feel if that were completed, then I would be more present at home.
A trainee comes to mind that I work with who benefits very well from having a standing appointment with me once a week where we just take a look at what needs to get accomplished during the week and when can it happen and what are all of the goals. Because you're right, that's a lot to hold all at once. And all of the associated tasks with each one of those roles that you just described can really, really build up. And you can feel this sense of paralysis of you don't even know where to start and you don't even know where to begin. So choosing a day that makes sense for you, a partner that makes sense for you in goal planning and doing this on a weekly basis, whatever feels right to you, just a half an hour to sit down and map out how we're going to do all of this week, can be really, really beneficial, and I would recommend that.
Similarly to that, I just recently, on a personal note, started doing once a week a brain dump of just writing out absolutely everything bouncing around inside there. And just the simple act of writing it all down, I physically felt the sensation of, okay, I don't have to try to 24/7 remember what tasks have to be done, what's associated with what as they're bouncing around and keeping track. It's all on the paper. That's out of my head. My fear is always I'm going to forget a task and not do it. If I fear that, I open the page. Here's everything that I've been wondering about, nervous about, stressing about. It's on the page if I feel like I'm going to lose it. And then the second step from that, if you have time, is similarly kind of mapping out what's first priority here. Here's my 3 things that are happening on these days of the week. And again, just the simple act of taking it out of my head and putting it down on the paper once a week, just that brain dump has been super helpful.
Anything else?
So retrospectively, going back, if you could tell yourself as a graduate student what would be healthier for you if a graduate student came to you now and said, I'm really struggling with all of this. I feel like I have imposter syndrome. If I don't do this, I'm not successful. I can't have a family. Like, looking back at yourselves, what would you tell yourselves now would be the best balance for you? Or would that be really hard? Because I feel like grad school is just a really difficult time because you're trying to accomplish so much and get to that professional level that you feel like everyone expects so much of you, including of yourself. Would it be easy to go back and give yourselves the same grace that you're communicating now?
I think for me it would have been quite difficult. It's one of those things where I don't want to say this and say that everything that we said is just really hard to implement, because in many ways it is. But I probably just would have told myself that it's going to be okay. You will be better for having endured this, and aspects of it may suck now, but don't despair, because this is when you are investing in your future. And something more actionable, I probably would have said, yeah, go tell your primary care doctor that you're stressed out and see what resources they can connect you with. But in the end, this will be okay.
Similarly, I needed to hear back then just the overarching message of you are worth 1 hour with a therapist or a counselor to just spend some time on your own thoughts and feelings, because thoughts and feelings lead to behaviors. And if you're not making those connections, and sometimes you need somebody to help you make those connections and make healthier choices, starting with your thoughts and your feelings. And I think what I needed was almost permission to feel worthy of that 1 hour with somebody else, that it's not a failure or that it's not a shortcoming on my behalf, that I'm in need of counseling or therapy, but that you're worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a student full-time with me right now, and I was just telling her on Friday about a skill that I've developed over my career that in grad school it was the scariest thing in the world to me, public speaking, and now that's a huge part of my job. And one of the most intense semesters of my life was when we had to do a lot of it. And I was recounting that to her and saying that at the time, I thought that nothing was worse in the entire world. And I am so incredibly grateful for that now. And it kind of led me to talking about my entire grad school experience and how my class was just 14 of us. About 8 of us realized at the same time we all had dental issues because we were grinding our teeth because we were so stressed. And once we talked about that, and then looking back, the times I remember when I was calm, just little spurts in 2 years, was when a group of us just took a little bit of time. We would just go outside, we'd throw a Frisbee around for an hour, and it was just okay, we're all stressed. We are sharing that with each other. We're just going to go outside and we're going to have a moment. And that was enough to just kind of calm us down, get us going through it. It was hard, and I don't know that anybody gets out of higher education unscathed in that way, but I do think that it is incredibly worth it, and you are better for it afterward. And it's a lot of times I'll look back and I'll be like, this seems stressful. It's not the same as when I had dental issues all across my mouth for months because I was so stressed. So perspective is also helpful.
Me too. I have a permanently dislocated TM joint from similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Is that all? Well, thank you all very much. I don't have any other questions. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you really want to hit on before we wrap up?
Actually, one thing I do want to say.
Yes.
I know it from experience, and I work with a lot of people. I want everyone to remember caffeine is not energy. Caffeine is a stimulant. Food is the only source of actual energy. If you are exhausted and you can't focus, caffeine's not going to help. Get a snack first and then put caffeine on top of that. That should be kind of a rule of thumb to live by for everybody.
Anything else?
Everything in moderation, including moderation. I heard that was an Arnold Beckman thing. I don't know if that's...
Love it. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right. I think that's it. Hey, thanks to the audience. Thanks so much for tuning in to the latest episode of the Next Step podcast. If you liked what you heard, please share with other members of the University of Rochester community or anyone you think could benefit from these career stories. And we wish you nothing but the best in your own career journey. Until next time.